1st of June, 1823. It is night time. Americanos, Creoles, and various other officers marched into Manila Cathedral, looking for the Governor General. They searched and taken numerous military posts, governmental buildings, in the Pearl City of Intramuros. One officer reported back to a certain Spanish captain that they couldn't find the Governor General, but they instead found his subordinate, Lieutenant Governor Mariano Fernandez del Falgueras. They brought him captive in front of the captain. The then envious, resent-driven captain drew his blade into Falgueras as he looked deep in his eyes, watching the life drain out of him. A crowd gathers outside the cathedral, wondering what the fuss is all about, when the captain stepped out and addressed the crowd. "This is my moment, dear brothers and sisters, to liberate our country from the hands of the oppressors. I am already master of the city and of the palace, and all of the constituent authorities. I, therefore, exhort you to join me in proclaiming independence in the fort you command, and prepare to defend the sacred cause like a true citizen." The soldiers chanted in unison as they marched from behind him. "Viva el Emperador Novales! Viva el Emperador Novales!" The crowd erupts in cheer, in support, hopeful for a better future with liberty and equality for all. Andrés Novales was executed before he did anything, so it's impossible to predict what he would do if he had won. Did I forget he was just 23 years old? A life cut short. I could try to make comparisons with what Napoleon did early on, but I personally doubt it would be anything drastic. Possibly consolidating power, restructuring the government into an imperial system similar to that of Otto von Bismarck's Prussia or Napoleon's France. But it is important to note that the Napoleonic Wars was just 8 years ago, and seeing another emperor rise up would stir up anger with the European powers. So even if Novales won and actually took over all of the archipelago, he would be surrounded by stronger European powers and would be subsequently surrounded and economically heavily isolated. But let's just say he successfully took over Intramuros and kicked out the Spanish off of Luzon. This is reminiscent of the Mexican War of Independence just 2 years ago, where the colonies are breaking off from the crown. Eventually, a treaty would be signed that grants the archipelago's independence. And here we can pick and choose names for this newly independent nation. A bit of history: Philippines is named after King Philip II of Spain, hence the term Philippines and Filipino. But I have proposed name changes that he could have used. Some already exist, like Haring Bayang Katagalugan by Andrés Bonifacio. But that is 1890s, way later historically than this timeline. Kapatiran is very closely related to the term Katipunan, but the context here is not synonymous with the revolution of Andrés Bonifacio because it never happened, or never will happen. So it is used as a national identity under Andrés Novales. The term tipon means to organize, synonym to kapatiran. We already call people who are older than us ate and kuya, so calling a fellow countryman as kapatid, which means siblings, makes sense to me. I think it's a fun play on the 3 major island chains of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Also the fact that Greece may have crossed over or at least documented Visayas is pretty cool, but not related to law. I just want to add it there. Baybayin is an old manuscript, descendant of the Kawi scripts of the Brahmic script, native to the Filipinos even before the Spanish, and during the Spanish occupation since Tagalog was banned and could get you executed. Baybayin means the spell, and I could see this ancient manuscript could be a unifying national identity. Novales is born in Manila, an ancient kingdom that used to be there where modern-day Manila is, Rahanate of Manila, surrounded by a stronger, influential kingdom of Tundon. Maybe Novales became an avid historian and chose this ancient kingdom as his basis for this newly independent nation. Here's another one, cause why not? 1823 onwards, I envision him forming his cabinet throughout the Revolutionary Wars, similar to how the Katipunan expanded into numerous affiliated factions, which caused internal conflict. In this timeline, Novales had no idea how to run a government, unlike the Katipunan, which was years in the making. Yet, it crumbled under internal divisions, notably Emilio Aguinaldo and Andres Bonifacio. But since the Ilustrados were not kicked out by the Spanish majority, I could see Novales enlisting them to form a government. He had the support of not only the people, but also the enlightened ones, those who studied abroad in Madrid, Belgium, Paris, and everywhere else in Europe. It will also be this period where the constitution would be written under Novales' name, where all power by God and law consolidated under his or her reign, an authoritarian government. Eventually, somehow, against all odds, with the proud people no longer under Spanish oppression, the early Ilustrados would form an organization. In this timeline, there could be a whole organization composed of these Ilustrados, with Marcelo H del Pilar being the head. They, along with the imperial officers, ran the nation. Historical secret organizations such as the La Liga Filipina, Cuerpo de Compromisos, and Prima Luz Filipina against the Spanish government could have still formed regardless, but most if not all of the members would be part of the organization, a katipunan, if you will. Katipunan ng mga Ilustrados. During the revolution, Andrés Novales could have abolished the colonial government, which would later on be his undoing post-war. If problems persist, and for sure there will be, Andrés Novales could enlist former Spanish colonial officials into the cabinet until a member from the Katipunan ng mga Ilustrados could take their place. This might anger some members, so he'll have to convince the council that despite them being part of the oppressors, without them, the nation would collapse into independent provinces, and it's better to do it now before it gets too late. Andrés Novales' early revolution puts the nation into a very vulnerable position, with a massive brain drain due to the lack of intellectuals who, for the most part, are still in Europe, studying, pursuing personal careers like Jose Rizal. So I could see Emperor Novales reaching out to the Ilustrados, people who are educated abroad to come back, to help with the rebuilding. Notable people such as Marcelo del Pilar, who, despite not being the man he is known to be historically, could probably be given the opportunity early on by Andrés Novales, asking him to reach out to people who are desperate to study abroad to be sent there. Another problem would arise, separatists. So at the same time, he'd have to quell those rebellions, if there are, and forcibly subjugate them. He could justifiably state that this is essential for the survival of the young nation. But that's to not say he has no power projection. The reason he is successful in the first place is because he has the head of the army who rallied behind him from day one. And as more and more battles are won, villagers he liberated would join his army despite being under-equipped. Once he's taking Luzon and most of the islands surrounding it, he'd be unleashing a campaign towards the south, into Visayas, and finally Mindanao. I have no idea of how good of a military leader he is since he died so early, so this will just be entirely speculation. He could have enlisted the aid of Luis Rodriguez of Varela, a royalty from Spain who shared his views of independence, finance, and even weapons, but in secret. Assuming that the War of Independence led by Novales lasted approximately 3 years, a signed treaty formalizes him as head of the new independent state, along with his now imperial cabinet of officials. And so at 1826, he is crowned emperor at the age of 26, younger than Napoleon was when he was crowned at 35. The following years would follow historically to some degree. 1828, a devastating earthquake. 1830, Manila is open to a world market, could have been earlier with progressive reforms and industrialization. 1841, Samar province historically declared independent by Queen Isabella III of Spain, but under Novales, this would have never happened. 1861, Jose Rizal is born. 1862, El Pasic newspaper is published. 1872, historically Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora would have been executed under Spanish rule due to conspiracy of aiding the Cavite Mutiny. But under Novales, this wouldn't have happened. 1863, the 30th of November and 23rd of July, Andrés Bonifacio and Apolinario Mabini are born. 1877 is historically where the Spanish colonial government conducts official national census, basically where they all count the actual people. This would probably be done during and after the revolution to get a grip on everyone under Novales' reign. Just to count how many people there are. 1878. Historically, the Sultanate of Sulu gave the rights of Sabah to the British North Borneo Company, but Novales would never allow this, so part of the Sabah would be part of the nation. 1880. Manila is connected telegraphically to Europe via the Eastern Telecom. And that's what would probably happen under his reign. Ruling with an iron fist, optimistic, progressive, conservative sentiments, a legacy for everyone to follow or even change. Now, assuming Novales dies at the age of 55 in 1881, the average age of a person in the 1800s, this without an heir. But with an established cabinet of appointed officials, Novales would have appointed a successor. Now the question arises, who will be Andrés Novales' heir? It is possible he could have married while he reigned and produced an heir that way, but most of that would be entirely hypothetical. While yes, this is alternate history, I still want to stick more to historical relevancy. A great candidate that I could find who could continue the legacy of Novales is Luis Rodriguez Varela, inspired by the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. Also an ilustrado entitled as El Conde Filipino, or Philippine Count, a European noble advocating of the Philippine independence. Someone who historically advocated social reforms like liberty, fraternity, and equality. Some accounts he published a book called El Parnaso Filipino, but when I look up the book, the author is Eduardo Martina de la Camera. It is at this point that I'm looking at a history that is rarely documented, which would make most of my resources secondary or even not credible, which is a shame. Also, by 1826, Varela was already 58 and he'd be long dead by the time Novales would be looking for an heir or had died. Another possible successor is Pedro Palez, a Filipino Catholic priest, an unlikely candidate, but historically was an advocate of secularization. Worked with Father Gomez for the parishes to stay with the Filipinos, who was already running it for years. He is popular amongst the clergy. Also, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this already, but I am going through the very basic gist of Philippine history. I suggest you do your own research if you want to look into the reasons telling you the things that I'm telling you. Prominent historical figures at this time would still be young when Novales passed away at 1881. Jose Rizal at 20, Andres Bonifacio at 18, Graziano Lopez y Gaina, 25, Marcelo H. del Pilar, 31, Mariano Ponce, 18, Emilio Aguinaldo, 12, Antonio Luna, 15, Apolinario Mabini, 18, Deodato Arellano, 37. Here's the national bureaucracy. This is just a very basic structure that I came up with. I just want to throw it out there. Probably someone could do better than this.
Mahaba-habang panahong nawaglit sa ating isip na ito'y damit ng bansang kay hirap malupig. Ang barong ito ay tatak Pilipinong talaga, dapat nating mahalin sa tuwi-tuwi na. Sa sariling bayan natin alinsangan, makapal na tayo'y hindi kailangan. Ang barong Tagalog kahit sinamay lang, ginhawang gamitin sa lahat ng pagdiriwang. Nang maghimagsik itong ating bansa dahil sa paglaya. Ang barong Tagalog natin ay dakila, pagkat siyang ginamit ng bayaning namayapa. sariling bayan na di alinsangan. Magkapal na kayo'y hindi kailangan. Ang barong Tagalog kahit sinamay lang, ginhawang gamitin sa lahat ng pagdiriwang. Nang maghimagsik itong ating